My name's Danny Rance and I've worked in the music and entertainment industry for over 2 decades. Come with me as I pull back the curtain on Australia's craziest and wildest nightclub precincts in the Clubland Chronicles. Stayed there for 24 hours before they found them or passed away. And no shit, when they bought it, it had bullet holes in it. The old home of rainbow-coloured spew. So the kid that pissed on the wall had to wear the pissy t-shirt and he was petrified. But they ran down there and a couple of those guys jumped into the river and a couple of those guys drowned. One of those events was a drive-by shooting that killed 2 people. Came to a crashing end because a lot of gang activity. It became like a gangster's paradise and hangout. If you had a fake ID and you lived in the inner suburbs or you went to a private school or an APS school in Melbourne, you were welcome to come here and spend your money in drop pingers. And sold piss and sold Jaeger bombs, and we also may have sold other things that you're not supposed to sell over the bar. There was zero security. We are back, baby. Let's ram. So tonight we're doing Chapel Street. It's been my most requested street out of all the streets in Melbourne. We're starting the Toorak and we're going to work our way all the way down to Princess Highway. So the first club on the rank, even though it's not in Chapel Street, it cannot be not mentioned, is Track, which is just near the corner of Chapel Street and Toorak Road. So Track Lounge has been an iconic venue for a very, very long time. It used to be where a lot of celebrities used to hang around. Even though it's in Toorak and you might think that it's full of Toorakians, it's not really, hasn't been. It once was a guy called Sammy Prost used to run a night down here. And at that point it was like at its peak. They used to do thousands of people on a Thursday. And they had guests like Nicky Webster and Daryl Braithwaite. Daryl Braithwaite actually became like a really iconic thing. It was really, really cool to like ironic things. So for whatever reason, they did a bunch of ironic acts and the whole night kicked off and old mate Sammy would have made an absolute bucket. Since then, it's sort of not really had a strong weekly for a very, very long time. It has a lot of like different ethnicity sort of nights and one-offs and whatnot. Kylie Minogue played there years and years ago, probably a decade ago now. The venue's immaculate. It's actually fucking amazing. Huge hall, huge stage, unbelievable. Last time I went there, I saw Chillin' It. The Grabs boys were running the Friday there, which I think was pretty short-lived. But I went down and watched Chillin' It perform, which was sick. But the venue, I think, just too big. And in this current climate that we live in now, I don't think it can continue to do that well, or probably ever will, just solely for the fact that it is just so fucking large. But sick venue to start with. Let's keep moving. Also, too, Track recently has had a whole lot of dramas itself. I know a security guard knocked someone out, a guy that was actually in the UFC, and he actually did jail time, so he fucked up his career, unfortunately, on an incident here. And then more recently, there was a DJ that got attacked by 4 people and was in critical condition in a hospital. Here we're on the corner of Chapel Street and Toorak Road. One of the most iconic clubs probably ever in the history of Melbourne club life was just on the corner here. And I said Toorak Road and Chapel Street. Pretty sure you should know what I'm talking about. And it is, or was I should say, Cuba. So Cuba was here for fucking ever, and it legitimately at its peak, it used to be open for 7 days a week. So 7 days a queue, they used to call it. My business partner Kyle Hand ran his first night here, and that's what motivated me to start running clubs, because I saw him do it and I was like, fucking, if he can do it, I can do it too. Me and him continued to work there for many years afterwards. We used to do Thursdays, and we weren't big fans of Thursdays, but back then, there was so many clubs around. There was like Play School, Asian, Candy Bar, fucking what else? Boutique and Cuba, just on the street, and they're all busy hours on Thursdays. So we would literally go through the door, check in our IDs, pick up our drink cards, go through the smokers, fuck off, go visit every single club in Melbourne, roll back in at 3 a.m, finish our drink cards, and then head out the door with our pay, and we're getting $400 a week to host there. So anyway, other stories about Cuba. On my 21st birthday, I actually celebrated in Cuba, and it was one of the loosest nights I ever had. I honestly should not have been in the venue. Like, I was so totaled. I remember sitting behind, it was DJ John Course at the time, and I like leant back because I thought that there was like a wall there, but it was a curtain. And I actually, no, it wasn't DJ John Course, it was fucking Adam Bartis. And I rolled back and fell down like a full flight of stairs, and even then I still didn't get kicked out. Most of my fond memories of Cuba legitimately are getting there and then spending my whole fucking night looking for passes for the Red Room. So anybody that would remember, they used to have mods and space in the Red Room, and you only could get in the Red Room if you had passes, so like a wristband. So every single person in Melbourne would be sitting there hustling, trying to figure out how they could get access to passes so they could go party in the Red Room. The Red Room was not even good. It was this tiny little room on the side of the venue, and it just had not even better DJs really. Like, don't get me wrong, Spencer's a fucking local legend. But it was just so people knew you were there. And then there was another one. There was one called the Green Room. So if you were VIP, you could get into the Green Room. So you had to know one of the staff or one of the owners or whatnot. And there was like another way around there, and that was even shitter. It was just literally a room with curtains. It was green. They didn't even have a DJ, but had a little bar there, and you would literally just go in there to flex. Getting into the red room was a massive achievement. But getting into the green room, you knew you were one of the guys. After a very, very long tender, Cuba eventually closed down, and it was very, very sad. And I reckon most of Melbourne cried. I know a lot of people would look back on Cuba, especially the Thursdays and the Sundays, with fond memories. On a Sunday, you used to go there and it used to pump. It was mad. The Thursdays were always on and off all right, so it was more of a Thursday and Sunday venue, but it was dirty, it was grungy, it was red. You used to go underground. It was sort of like just around here, actually. There was like an alleyway. Let's see if it's still there. But it was very, very grungy. So you used to walk around here, this exact alleyway, I'm pretty sure. Yep, it was just, well, there was an alleyway there that's gone now. You walk around the corner and they used to have a box that was an ID checker. And for anyone that didn't know, or anyone with half a brain, they would have known that there was actually no camera in it. So they built a box with a light in it, and they would punch your ID under there and tap it. And basically then they would take it out and give it back to you. And I remember sometimes they'd pretend it was broken down and shit to make it more legit. And it wasn't legit. It was literally a box with a light in it. But it stopped people from punching on because people were worried that if they got in trouble there and their ID got flagged, they wouldn't be able to get back in. But I'm sorry to break to you guys, it was actually a fake ID scanner. It was still on Turak Road. We actually haven't walked down Chapel Street on the corner of Turak and Chapel. But up here there was 3 clubs that lived on this street in very early days. I reckon like 2005 they were still open. Lotus Bar. So Lotus Bar was like basically a gangster hangout. It eventually closed, but it was rumoured to have mafia ties and people owning it that were in the mafia. But so I don't want to speculate who because I don't want to get shot and killed. But basically, it was up here somewhere. I don't exactly remember. I do remember, but I don't remember exactly where it was now because everything's changed so much. But as I said, there was a gangster hangout. I never really went there myself. Didn't have much college, but it was called Lotus Bar. The other one up here on Claremont Street, which we're not too far off now. I'll try to find it, but I dare say that's been knocked down too. This whole area's been gentrified and there's basically not one club down this side of Chapel Street anymore. So up here on Claremont Street, which we're about to come up to, there was a really, really serious incident that I remember when I was like probably just 18. Basically, there was a club here called Nightclub, and the Saturdays was an Asian club. That's Claremont Street there. It was down here somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where, but as I said before, I used to actually have an office here. My first ever office was on this street, but now it's been knocked down and all turned into apartments. But basically, what happened was there was a biff to do with a girl that had nothing to do with inside the club. It was something to do external. 5 guys got chased out of the club by another 7 dudes, and they had knives. So they came back after the altercation, and they basically waited for them. And then once they came out of the club, they chased them down to the Yarra. And to give you context, the Yarra is literally at the end of that street, like probably about a kilometre. But they ran down there, and a couple of those guys jumped into the river, and a couple of those guys drowned and died. And one of the guys didn't jump into the river. He got stabbed multiple times in a bus stop. So that was a pretty serious incident. Apparently he kept running. I actually thought it closed down after that, but apparently he kept running for a while. But that was like one of the most memorable for me, because I guess that was the first real violent incident that I saw or heard of when I first started like clubbing. And I knew people that worked there and stuff, and there was a lot of that sort of shit that was going on in that period of time. A lot of Asian gang sort of stuff. On the other scope of that, we're going to go up to a club called Saratoga, which no doubt has turned into hotels too now, but we're going to go up to that, which was completely different. You sort of had your Middle Eastern and European gangs at Lotus Bar, you had your Asian gangs at Salt, and then you had your private schools at Saratoga, just up the road here. Saratoga was famous for underages. Private school underages. I didn't go there a lot because we didn't go to a private school, basically. But everyone I know who went to a private school came here at like 15, 16. So I'm guessing the train station is probably part of the reason why that happened. And the owners didn't give a fuck. They used to do after deb lock-ins where you could hire the venue and they'd like basically sell piss to underages if you paid the money to be there. It was renowned for underages up until it closed. I only ever did one event there, and funnily enough, it was one of my most iconic brands. It was the first ever Debbie Does. So the first ever Debbie Does I ran at Saratoga, and that went on to become one of the biggest brands for the last decade all across Melbourne and influenced many careers in the Melbourne sound market. So as you can see, the trade station's just there, and then Saratoga was just down here. We'll go check it out. I'm assuming it's going to be hotels, but fucking hopefully it's not. Surprise, surprise, motherfuckers. This is also now a new development. As I said, it's all been gentrified. There is fucking nothing from back in the old days, but Saratoga was about here. So if you had a fake ID and you lived in the inner suburbs, or you went to a private school or an APS school in Melbourne, you were welcome to come here and spend your money in drop pingers. Again, most, like anyone I know who went to a private school raves and rants about it. I didn't like it. That's why I only ever did one event there. It was tiny and small, and I didn't think it was much chop. I think the reason, in my opinion, the only reason why people went there was because you could go there underage or you could do a lock-in deb. All right, let's go head to Chapel Street and go check out the clubs there. So we're going to start in the corner of Turek Road and I'm going to work our way all the way up to Princess Highway. A lot of stories, a lot of tales, a lot of fun. So just up here, I used to stay at a hotel relatively regularly. So it was about, I think it was $80 a night back then for like 2 beds, single beds. And we would hire it with like 3 or 4 of us. And when we would go to Prince on like 18s or 19s back in the day, and we wouldn't really do a lot of sleeping. We'd do a lot of smoking darts downstairs, but it was somewhere to call home before we had to go home. Looking back at it now, I'm like, ugh. At that time, it facilitated a need that we needed. Eventually, I'm going to get to St Kilda. I reckon that's sick. When I first started going out, that's where I used to hang around, but until then, let's keep talking about Chapel Street. I don't want to divert. And again, that hotel that I stayed at was here, and that also has been knocked down, believe it or not. Wild, huh? It's kind of crazy to me that they've done that, because like all this culture used to be here, and it used to be a sick area, and now there's fuck all here. And it's all shiny and new and whatnot, and it just doesn't really have a soul in my opinion. But anyway, maybe I'm just being an old dude reflecting back in the old days. At this next club, I don't reckon anyone ever heard of, but there's a yarn for it. So this was a place called Spider Club, and they spent all this cash on it, and it was meant to be the next big thing, and it had like LED screens and TVs, and it was all fancy as fuck, and it looked like if Ed Hardy had spewed on the ground. So we're near Jam Factory now, and it was just down this street here, Palmero, and it was above that shop there. So there was a club in there, and the guy spent a fuckload, and they lost a fuckload of money because it flopped in like 3 weeks. But the reason why I went there was I used to work at a place called Fuck Sundays in St Kilda, which used to pump at a place called The Saint, a venue that I love, and no doubt I'll get there and I'll talk about it when I get there, because it had a big part to do with my upbringing in club world. I used to spend all my Sundays there after Revolver or after TFU. The guy who ran it was a guy called Nick Cuba, and he decided to move here, and it lasted 3 weeks. And even though it was brand new and it looked really, really good, it just felt like a fucking hospital. It had zero vibe, and people in Melbourne just like the grungier the better. So because it felt so new, everyone was like, man, it feels so sterile, like fancy. It just flopped. And then it sat there for years and years and years. I don't know what happened to it. I'm guessing they pulled it all out. Another wild story. The first party I ever did actually wasn't in a nightclub. It was above what used to be still is General Pants. Wow, there you go. Something that hasn't changed. Up above there was a penthouse. And that penthouse we hired out at, I think we were 18, maybe just, and we hired it out to do an after party. We convinced them to let us run their party. My business partner for Loud, Kyle Hand, who I worked with for fucking well over a decade, it was sort of his brainchild with his cousin Matty P, and we ran this event. And this event, we literally bought piss and sold Jager bombs, and we also may have sold other things that you're not supposed to sell over the bar. There was zero security. We were the adults basically, and we were like 18, maybe 19, and everybody else in there was like 16, 17. So it was fucking a wild party. And I look back at it fondly, even though I shouldn't, because it was very, very illegal, and I don't know how we got away with it, considering it was literally on the top of Chapel Street, and everyone could see these kids hanging out getting absolutely sloshed, probably because they didn't know we were selling piss. Back then it was a lot easier to get away with that kind of stuff. That was my first taste of running an event, and we made cash. So I was like, fuck me. And that's when I really started to think, maybe we could just run illegal parties and continue to make money off this, and I wouldn't have to work. Because realistically, as soon as I started to work, I knew that one thing I didn't want to do was keep working a 9 to 5. I knew that I wanted to work in partying, and I just had to figure it out. And that was probably the first thing that made me think, maybe this is possible. Wild event. I can't believe we got away with it, but we did. So let's continue on. So we're walking up here. There's a couple of pubs that are famous. One's Brighter O'Reilly's, and this restaurant here, actually, I actually had my 21st birthday at. It wasn't called that, but it's the same location. And sadly enough, there was 6 people there, I think, and no, 8, and there's only 6 of us left. So 2 of the boys that we grew up with passed away, which is a bit of a shit memory, but it is what it is. Brighter O'Reilly's, there's a little bit of a story here, not from me, but the guys I grew up with. So there's this dude that I know, and he's one of the toughest motherfuckers I ever met. And basically, there's a story of him that's sort of been famous, but they got in the blue at the back of the bar with someone, and the security guards turned on him to pull him out. And they decided they didn't want to because they knew they were going to get arrested, and one of them was looking at jail time. So they legitimately bashed their way to the front, from the back all the way to the front of the venue, and got away. So that's a true story, believe it or not. It sounds fake, but it's 100% true. There used to be a bar down that way too called Trist. I'm not going to go there. There was some promoters that run it. I think Dave from Bowie, maybe even Mark Pellegrini. It was sort of like a really cool outdoor, indoor sort of house vibe. I never ran a party there, but there was a venue there nonetheless. Up here on the corner, I think everyone went there when they first turned 18, but it was a joint called Frostbites. and Frostbites is now, I believe, the Temperance Hotel. But basically, Frostbites was slushies on a wall. So you go there, and there was like 16 slushies on the wall, and you'd challenge yourself to see if you could get through all the slushies. I don't know anybody that did it, but you would puke fucking rainbows. When you were 18 years old, it was like the one place you wanted to go, and you would go there, and it was pretty rough, I'm not gonna lie, and the slushies taste like absolute balls, but it was just a fucking rite of passage. You were 18 years old, you went to Frostbites, and you try to drink that wall. There it is in all its glory, old Frostbites. I reckon just looking at that joint throws back a lot of memories for people. Oh fuck, it's got beeped. The old home of rainbow-coloured spew. It's been the Temperance for a long time now, but Frostbites was fucking packed. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's kind of cool looking at Frostbites because obviously I started my journey there. I started my journey there in a place called Glenferrie Hotel. And when I was 18, I was actually like, man, is this it? Like all the house parties and shit I went to were so much better than these shit fucking bar clubs that have frozen cocktails on the wall. And then it probably took me almost a year before I found real nightclubs like Prince and TFU and all these other mad ones that became iconic. So it was a journey. Back then, you didn't have Google. You couldn't look at Facebook or Instagram and see where people were going. You literally had this thing called Beat Magazine that you'd have to read the clubs. And then what you would do was you'd go visit one by one until you found your scene. And it was fucking hard and challenging, and it was word of mouth, but at the same time, it made for an adventure. So you'd go to all these different nightclubs trying to find places you liked or you didn't like. And then some of them you would meet new people and you would fucking open up your network, and it was cool. But Frostbite sort of takes me back because that was one of the first venues I went to, and it was sort of the beginning of my journey, and where my journey started and where my journey ended. It was so polarizing, completely different than what I could have ever expected or ever wished for. It doesn't get more Chapel Street than the iconic fucking Zos it was called originally. And then obviously the venue was called Chasers. Zos was probably the biggest European night ever, the most famous. When I used to come down here when I was younger and we'd do chap slaps on a Saturday night before I turned 18, we would come here and this joint was mayhem. You had Viper on that side, which I'll go into in detail shortly. This KFC here, which you didn't stop through or past unless you had a death wish, and then Zos. And this is like, think of Z's. This is where Z's copied his fashion. Like you would come here and it was the most European crowd there was. They had the tappers, they had the spike bleached hair, they had the tie-dye jeans. This was the home of muzzers. This was the origins of muzzers. And then, strangely enough, it turned into one of the biggest gay nights in Melbourne. So Poof Doof now lives here, called it home for a pretty long time, for probably 5 or 6 years. So Poof Doof is probably one of the biggest gay nights and longest running gay nights in Melbourne. And it took over from the most woggiest, hectic night that I ever saw personally, which is pretty crazy. I only ever did one event here. I ran a thing called House Party on a Thursday with a guy called James Logan and a bunch of other guys. We used to run another place called Evolution, and we did it for years, called Play School. We tried to emulate that here, and we flopped it fucking hard. It didn't work, because back then it had a reputation of being a muzzer venue, and we just couldn't convert a white Anglo crowd to come here. Chasers had been around for ages. There's another story of Snoop Dogg playing here as an after party, and he was supposed to be on at like 1 a.m. He rolled in at 9 p.m. and continued to play till 3 a.m. As people were rolling in, they were like literally screaming because they couldn't believe that Snoop Dogg was fucking the opening set. They've had all kinds of famous artists here. It's an iconic venue. It's owned by Martha. So Martha is basically the queen of clubs. She owns Inflations in the City and various other venues throughout her tender in the nightclub world. And she has faced the police and won multiple times. She is a part of that story where the guy got shot at the sex club that I've told before by the police because they thought that he had a gun, and she sued them and won. And she also recently won another case here where one of the gay nights that they do here, basically there was a sexual assault or something like that, and the police shut her night for 40 minutes, and when they opened up it was dead. And she sued them because the sexual assault was a fake claim, and she won. So you don't fuck with Martha because she's the queen of the clubs. One more thing on Martha before I cross the road, but during COVID, she pivoted hard as fuck and she started selling dildos on the road. So you can literally buy hand sanitizer, gloves and face masks. She was probably one of the first people in Australia to get COVID tests. And she was selling dildos on the side of the road, coffees and stuff, out of her nightclub. She actually ran for mayor, or she ran for councillor or some shit at one point too. The queen of clubs, unstoppable. Okay, now we're gonna cross the road to Viper Room. Back in the day, Chapel Street is very quiet now, but back in the fucking day, you'd just be VL turbos. People used to put their phone numbers on the back so chicks could call them if they locked their car. It was hectic. Jemmies, everything, everywhere. I used to come down here and it would be at a standstill and you'd be moving like probably a fucking kilometre at a time. And basically, yeah, it was like a guy that I knew, a guy called Giuseppe, I shit you not, met his wife here. She called or texted his number on the back of his car, and It was a Destinies, and they fell in love, and they've got 2 children now, and they live in Roxburgh Park probably. So here is what used to be called Viper Room. It's now called Lux. So when it was Viper Room, it was very fucking notorious. It basically came to a crashing end because a lot of gang activity. It became like a gangster's paradise and hangout. And basically what happened was it started getting shot up, and there was all kinds of fucking charges. People were getting bashed. They were hiding camera footage. The coppers were giving heavy pressure. There was a lot of gang activity hanging around it. I think the managers were involved with it. I think the owners were involved with it. And then they were forced to close. They got their license reduced to 3 a.m. And then effectively the coppers stood in and was like, nah, this is not going to happen, my bros. And then from there, my business partner in Wet Pussy's family actually bought it. And no shit, when they bought it, it had bullet holes in it. So it still had bullet holes in this club. Then they ended up selling it. That was called Red Benny's. It was like a cabaret thing. They sold that to concentrate back in King Street because they're fucking the King Street family. They own half of King Street, so they was like, you know what, this is not our place to play, so we're going to leave and move. And then it turned into Lux. So Lux is owned by the guys that own Love Machine, and it has had ups and downs, like any other nightclub. It's done really well. It had a massive Sunday for a while. There's a brawl that one of my friends talks about, Bryce Raman. He reckons it's the biggest one he ever saw here on a Sunday. And then also too, recently there was a video that went viral with a guy trying to hit a security guard with a machete, but thank fuck he hit him with the wrong side and not much happened. Other than that, it's doing pretty well. The Saturday at the moment is called 333. It's run by these guys called Rhythm, Ollie Purble and his gang, or his crew I should say, not gang. And they're fucking dominating. They're really cool promoters. Culturally, they're one of the leaders in the scene, in my opinion. So if you haven't seen that place, go check it out. Love Mac has been around for a long time, over a decade, well over a decade, maybe coming up to 2 decades. And what's strange about Love Mac's history is that originally, when it first started, it was a house club on Fridays, and then on Sunday, it was a massive gay night. And that gay night got taken over by a mix of bikies and continued to be a gay night. I'm not sure why, but it got super heavy. It got sold, and then friends of mine, I won't mention the names, they bought it, and then they ran it and redid it up, and it killed it. It's been doing so well since. They did like a massive reno. They kind of put all these new neons and stuff through it and turned it into like, it was a club that never really pumped except for Sundays, basically survived off that trade, and then it became a club that pumped Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And they did a really good job, but unfortunately they had a string of unfortunate events. One of those events was a drive-by shooting that killed 2 people. I don't want to go into it too much because it's morbid basically, and that really fucked their business for a bit. They were able to overcome it, which I think a lot of people didn't believe they were going to be able to, including myself. All the promoters left because people didn't want to work there, and during that time when that happened, it was scary because no one really knew why. And normally when there is shootings at doors, which happens relatively every few years, I'd say, we normally know why it's happened. On that one occasion, we didn't. So everyone was a little bit scared, effectively, of what was going on. So even myself, I know that I wasn't hanging out in front doors at the time, but it ended up coming out that it was random. It was a random incident. And once that happened, people started to go back to the venues, the security started working there again, the promoters came back, and the guys continued to dominate. They've had their ups and downs over the period of time. It's actually a story that I've told before on my TikTok where the boys decided not to give footage to the police, and one of them got charged. And the reason why was that he didn't want to because of the persons or people that were involved in it, and he decided that he was better off being safe with them than the police. So they got a lot of backlash for that, but in my opinion they made the right decision. I would have done the same thing. They continue to dominate. They've got a night on Saturday that does really well, and their Asian night on Fridays is one of the biggest in Melbourne. I think they'll continue onwards forever. It's been one of those places that just continues to work over and over again. I think it's in a good location. Chapel Street, as you've seen tonight, is a lot more busy than the city is. This is a Wednesday and it's still busy, so you can imagine what it looks like on a Saturday. Hopefully no more ups and downs for them, or no more problems, and they can continue to trade and just make money and be honest businessmen like we all are, us nightclub owners. We are punching through these stories like cones in a bungalow, but here is another nightclub on Chapel Street, just off Chapel Street, on Commercial Road, that has been around for a very long time. Circus Bar. So this was where I ran my first ever event, and that event was called Fornicated. I was fresh 19, and I basically came here and asked if I could run an event, and I sold 200 tickets, and I sold those tickets to footy friends and school friends and school's friends' girlfriends and footy's friends' fucking cousins and rah, and I sold 200 tickets and I put together a lineup. Back then there was no Facebook, no MySpace, so I legitimately had to know DJs, get their numbers and basically book them to play. and put it on the old school way. So I sold tickets by giving them to people and networking and sending text messages, basically. I ran the event, it was successful, and that was the beginning of my career, because once I did that, I basically had proof that I could do it, and then I started getting real proper offers, and I was able to not work anymore and do this as a full-time job. So I took the deep dive, and it worked out well for me. A circus is like one of the heartbeats of Melbourne. It's been around for fucking like 15 years. It's had Jeremy used to be an owner, another guy called Pommy. Pommy's still an owner. Now it's owned by Nick Young, who owns a whole bunch of venues. Those guys absolutely smack it. It's a part of a group now. It's got a late night license, kills it on Sundays, has always killed it on Saturdays, and on and off Fridays. It was one of my main competitors for a while when I ran Cuba, when I did Lady Luck. They sort of started to take away from my crowd and eventually ended up shutting me down, but then I shut them down when I started up Fake Tits and Tramps. So suck the eggs, Pommy and the boys. Not long ago, literally 2 years ago, Dom Dollar and Will Sparks did a back-to-back, and the reason why they were both here is because it would have been where they used to go when they were younger, and it's known for that. It's known for its great hospitality, and it's also known for people just coming down that have blown up or used to be in the scene, because it's always been a friendly place with familiar faces that you can come and party till very early hours in the morning. A lot of my mates still go after their club night, so like they'll finish up in the city and they might finish at 5 a.m. and they'll head down to Circus. Or a lot of my mates that go to Revolver, once that shuts on a Sunday, they head over to Circus to finish off their night before they go to Breakfast Club. Okay, so up here we've got another club that's been knocked down and turned into a hotel, and then across the road from that we've got the Emerson. So the Emerson now is one of the busiest nightclubs in Melbourne. It wasn't for a bit. It kind of started at the start, it was like this fancy kind of uppity, ritzy club, and it boomed, and then it didn't. And to be honest, I hated the venue. I thought it sucked when they first opened it, and then it got taken over by that Nick Young group that I just talked about, and they revised it, and now it is absolutely dominating. It's easily probably the busiest Saturday in Melbourne currently. If you're an influencer with 100,000 plus fans, you're hanging out here. If you're a footy player, you're hanging out here. The last 2 years for the grand final, this is where the teams have gone to celebrate. So, but before it was Emerson, it was a place called The Market. So The Market was a very, very famous gay club for a very, very long time. It's where the guy from Dancing with the Stars was found with the drugs in his pocket, and then he denied and said he took his pants off because he was hot, and then someone put them in there. A friend of mine worked there for a very long time, and it used to finish like 9 a.m. So it was basically like a recovery gay club, and it used to hold like 2,000 people. There was 3 rooms. I know there was like a little room that people could go root. But what was funny about it was directly across the road, which is now the Cullen, there was a club called Evolution, and Evolution was like Chasers. So on Saturday night, it was a massive muzzer night, like full hectic VL Turbo people. And they were also a recovery club, so they used to go to like 9 or 10 a.m. in the morning. So when they first banned cigarette smoking, what I used to find fucking hilarious was this joint here, no one had smoking areas back then, because beforehand you could just punch durries in the fucking club. So when they did that, basically everybody had to put smoking areas on the front footpath, and that created one of the funniest things I fucking ever saw. So basically on this side here, you had all the gay and trans people that had come from everywhere because they'd go kick on there. So they come from all the gay bars on Commercial Road, and Commercial Road back then was a gay precinct. All the bars here were gay bars, all the clubs here were gay clubs, and again, there's none, but there was for ages. That was the history of Commercial Road. Anyway, on the other side of that bar, you literally had, as I said, VL Turbo people, and they would be over there screaming obscenities and fuck you. You can imagine exactly what they were saying to the trans and gay people over here. And they were doing the complete opposite. They were rizzing them up hard as fuck, telling them to come across the road because they want to kiss them, touch them, fuck them, all that sort of stuff. And it would roll these muzzers up. And sometimes it would burst out onto the middle of the road. And it was just like a clash of two worlds. There couldn't have been two separate audiences that were going to clash harder than Evo and fucking Market. I used to come here a little bit, go to the gay club sometimes, but I used to also go to Evo. My missus used to go to the gay club, so I'd often come pick her up from here. And it's kind of sad to see it's gone now because this was the street for it and it was fun. Over across the road though, we ran a night at Evolution called Play School, and that was really that was a massive, massive Thursday night. The most people in my generation would remember. We used to do like 2,000-3,000 people and it was fucking mayhem. But back then, Chapel Street was mayhem, so it was one of multiple, but definitely was the busiest. And we did it with a guy called Sammy Prosser and another guy called James Lothian, my business partner Kyle, and there was a whole bunch of other guys that don't promote or don't run shit anymore. But it lasted 2 summers, I think, and I remember going there after Daft Punk and everyone loved it. It was fucking sick. And we used to just have like literally Adam Bartis, but that was the first probably mix of private school and public school kids where they both went there together. So prior to that, it was always private school kids and public school kids, and they went to different clubs. When Thursdays popped off on Chapel Street, the two worlds again collided, and Play School was sort of like the bridging the gap. And then after that, you didn't really see it as polarizing as before. But before, it was legitimately the private school DJs would have their own names that I didn't even know, and then the public school kids had their own names that the private school kids didn't know. It was so different. And luckily for me, that happened because my wife is the complete opposite of me. I'm a fucking commission kid, and she is a private school girl. And without Chapel Street, I probably wouldn't have met her, because I met her friends through this clubbing era where the two worlds started to mix. All right, let's keep going. We're going to go back onto Chapel Street. So we're coming off Commercial Road now, back onto Chapel Street. I'm talking fast as fuck, boy, this time, because as I said, there's so many fucking clubs and I don't want this to go for 7.5 hours. On a Monday morning, this joint closes at 10 a.m. So basically all sorts of people come and congregate here to finish up their weekend or to start their journey into Breakfast Club, which is a club that runs all day Monday. So on a Monday, there is absolute crepins and gremlins walking out of that joint. Over there we got Electric, which is fucking, which is like the in spot at the moment. It's Wednesday night and it's open and it will be pumping because it always is. So Electric before COVID was just a spot that wasn't really dominating, but during COVID they played by their own rules and they didn't pay the price. They did the opposite. It actually boomed because everyone sort of like got around the fact that they were not listening and doing whatever they wanted, and it made it probably the coolest spot in town. The green room up the top there that you sort of hang over the balcony is fucking awesome. It's sort of like a bar club, and as I said, it's open all the time. They like whack the light holdings and shit like that. Still pumping. From what I've been told from my fucking TikTok, that you can't get in there on Saturdays, and that's owned by that same group, that Nick Young group. They own Circus and all those other venues, so they're like a big collaborative of cool venues, and they're all dominating. Now we're on Greville Street, and Greville Street used to be pumping, but now again, like everywhere else, I don't think there's even a club or a bar on it anymore. We're going to talk about some crazy clubs, but right here used to be a place called Stevie. It was like a clothing thing, and it was all bright colours, and you could scratch and sniff it. And basically, why I'm bringing that up is that when One Love was at its peak, that joint was like the fucking jams. And it culturally made such a big difference. Everyone was wearing fluoros and headbands and whatnot, and they were like the leading brand for it. And you used to have these t-shirts that were called Scratch and Sniff, where you could scratch them and sniff them, and they smelled like fucking bubblegum. And everybody wore it. Everyone had bleached blonde hair and like bright pink t-shirts and bright fluoro colours. It was basically like a club outfit. It was almost like the uniform for clubs for a while. This is Pawn & Co. This is a venue that has been doing very, very well for a very long time now. Before it was here, it was at another venue that used to be Chocolate Bar. I didn't stop there because I forgot to, but basically both those venues were kind of like cursed. We used to call them cursed venues because nothing would work there. And these boys, Josh Leffers and Gaz Kempster and a bunch of other fellas, they got Chocolate Bar to work and it pumped. And Pawn & Co basically is a joint where everything's for sale. So it's all pawn stuff. You walk in there, and if you want to buy something from the wall, you can. You talk to the bartenders and you work out a price and you can take it off the wall. Cool concept. They moved here to Jet Black, and that was Jet Black here. And that was owned by the same guy that owns like Baroque and shit. There was like a group of them. I can't remember. I think it was like LVL or something like Level Group. And they bought a whole bunch of venues and they didn't really work. This one was probably the most famous flop of them all from that group. It was called Jet Black, and it basically looked like the inside of a black trumpet machine, time warp, fucking Tron movie. And again, like I was saying before about that Spider Club, it felt like a hospital, and it just never ever popped off. And then after that, heaps of people did stuff there. No one could get it to work, and it was just like a cursed venue. Like at one point they were like giving it away, and everyone was like, nah, that joint's cursed. But the Pawn & Co boys proved everyone wrong, and they've been running that for like 7 or 8 years now, very, very successfully. So hats off to them. So behind me here used to be a place called Candy Bar, which was another venue that used to be kind of like pre-drink. So on a Thursday you would come here and you would preload before you went out to Cuba or Play School or Seven or Billboard or wherever. And there was another place down the road, at the end of the road, which I won't go to because it's a pub called Station, but that was the same. So at 6 p.m. you'd meet here, and these joints would be packed. There'd be like hundreds of kids in there, and they'd just be smacking super cheap pots, getting loaded for the next venues, which, Boutique was another one that popped off too. So you would just get absolutely hammered before you went out, and this whole place was pumping. Like, there would be full of 17 to fucking 23-year-old kids all through Greville Street, all through Chapel Street, and now, even on a Saturday, it's not as busy as what it used to be on a Thursday. Probably another thing worth me mentioning is there was a place down there called Beast Records. It's no longer there, but iconically for hip hop, it was arguably one of the most important and integral part of that community. They signed Hilltop Hoods in the early days, and basically anybody who was anybody except for Bliss and Esso at Obese Records, and it played such an integral part for that industry. And it has to be mentioned as I'm walking past it. And down here, there used to be a record shop called, I think it was called Rhythm and Vines, and you could buy records, and you used to be able to come down here and listen to the records or CDs. And I remember I bought my first T-Rex CDs, and I came down here and I'd listen to it. And everyone, you'd come down here and you'd see all DJs and whatnot, and they'd be buying all their records for the weekend or their CDs for the weekend. And something that's probably worth mentioning is that they would come in and buy, you'd see guys come in like, say, Andy Murphy or Piero. These guys would come down and they would find a tune they liked, and they how many copies do you have? And they'd say, 5, and they'd say, I'll take all 5. Because back then it was so slow to get records or get CDs that if you bought all 5, it meant that you were the only one to have that song in the city for fucking 3 or 4 weeks until a new one came and she got shipped from overseas or wherever they got shipped from. So it basically gave you an advantage on other DJs. And if a song blew up and you were the only person to have it, then basically you'd get booked everywhere. And that legit was a thing. If you could get a song before it got saturated in the market, you had the advantage and you'd be the most booked DJ for that month. So there was this, and there was another one in the city, and there was another one in Hawthorne that was called Alley Records, I think, that was just below Cheers. And that was sort of the 3 spots where everyone would buy their records and whatnot, or you can come down and listen to CDs before they came out. But again, the integral part, and it was cool for me as a networking thing when I was like a young grommet, I guess. I'd come down here and that's where I'd meet these massive DJs that I was watching on the weekends. So here laid Boutique, just here. I don't even know how you would get in now because I can't even see a door for it. But basically Boutique was the place where famous people went. Like Paris Hilton went there. Anybody from America would come to Boutique. It was owned by a guy called Razzle, and everyone called him Razzle Dazzle. And he was one of the OG Melbourne club guys with like Mark Udorovich and all the guys on King Street that own venues. On Saturdays it was for the rich and the famous. On Thursdays it was for the private school kids, and basically the ones who were going to be rich eventually. It was called Unlucky Thursdays, and it dominated. They ended up moving that to 7 and also dominated over there. But here was sort of the home for private school kids for a very, very long time. Like if you were a private school kid and you went out between 2005 to 2015, you spent a Thursday here or 2. I don't even know how you would get up there now or whatever, but that was Boutique. I didn't spend a lot of time there. It was too fancy for me. Again, I like my dungeons. I like to be able to walk down 2 levels into a grungy fucking basement or up 2 stories into a loft. That was just too shiny for me, so I didn't spend a lot of time. And again, I wasn't a private school kid, so it didn't really make sense. I ran a few events there. I never really rated it. I just didn't have much history with it. The owner, Razzle, he passed away, and it was a big loss to the community. A lot of people were upset. A lot of my friends grew up with him, so a lot of my friends that I hang around with in the industry, their parents were club owners or event and festival people, and their sons are my age, and their daughters are my age, and I knock around with them now. And Razzle had grown up with the older club guys, and it had like a bit of a detrimental effect on some of the guys that I grew up and hung around with, because he was like an uncle to them, and everyone was really saddened. But once Razzle left, the venue really never popped off again. It was owned by a few people. It got launched a few times, but it never really had the same impact it did when Razzle had it. Right, that's Greville Street. We're going to continue walking. We're about to hit Windsor. I haven't walked this whole trip, I'm not going to lie to you. I've been driving spot to spot because this street is so fucking big. Windsor is more of like a grungy area, and it's still, even though it's been gentrified, it still has its roots and cores. It hasn't been knocked down and turned into hotels like South Yarra has, and it's not all shiny and clean. So we'll be able to see some original venues, and we'll be able to see some personality up the Windsor way, because it still exists there, because the people that live there because they want that, whereas the people in South Yarra live there because they don't give a fuck about it, and they were the ones who complained and basically stopped all the clubs because they didn't like the sound. So let's keep walking. So there is Revolver. Enough said. Nah, I'm just joking. Revolver is one of the best nightclubs in the world. It's been voted like top 5 forever. It's actually in the top 10 things to do in Melbourne, recommended by the state. But basically what it is it's a 24-hour nightclub, and there's not many in the world. So Revolver, you're able to party there from midday Saturday up until Monday morning. So it continues to roll on. So there's DJs throughout the night and throughout the day, and you don't have to leave if you want. So you can stay there for over 24 hours. And other than Berlin, there's not many clubs in Australia that you're able to do that. Revolver obviously has this myth where someone died for ages and they didn't find them and rah rah. I find that hard to believe because when I used to go there, they were fucking on your hard as. If you accidentally went into the cubicle with two people, say that you're having a chat or something like that, they would be straight on you. It was almost impossible to do it. So I very highly doubt someone stayed there for 24 hours before they found them or passed away. But I don't know. Okay, maybe it's a myth that I'll bust one day. As I said before, it's a Wednesday, it's still open. But other than that, there's that story where they found a goldfish on the dance floor, and I actually found out who did that. It was the owner of Circus, Pommy. So I told that story, and it got a whole bunch of love on my TikTok. But basically, I then found out that the owner of Circus was the one who did it. So he used to purposely put things in there as a joke to sort of make the page, the Facebook page. Other than that, I've got another story about these guys from a Bucks party that rolled up there and they got knocked back at like 7 in the morning. So they decided to head around the back, and the smokers area is behind there, super grungy, super dirty. And they were like, fuck it, we'll climb up the smokers area and we'll try and climb into the smokers area. And this guy was getting married the week after, and basically he fell 2 stories and broke his leg. So he had to go to his wedding in a cast and fucking crutches because he tried to get into revs, and I reckon that would have been a really hard one to explain to his missus. Revolver is famous for every single massive DJ coming over. They want to play there. They play for free. So even if you're the biggest DJ in the world, they'll still only pay you $80 an hour. There's been marathon sets like Solomon's, Fen Vath. I did the first Australian Patch and Topping show there, again with a guy called Mike Toner and my boys, Andreas and Kyle. And it was one of my favourite events that I went to at Revs. When I was younger, I spent a lot of time in the car park, which is now hotels, just around this corner. Just as much time as I did in Revolver, but I did spend many days partying in there before I would head to Saint or after TFU. Like everyone did, I think it was a rite of passage to kick on and spend the day raving in Revolver. Oh, even Fred Again. So recently Fred Again just played there. So he rolled up and played there and he would have got paid $0 for it because Revolver is so iconic. Anybody that comes here wants to play there. So Revolver is not just famous in Australia, it's literally famous. As you can see, there's people taking photos right now. It is not just famous here, it's famous all over the world. So even when the DJs roll up here, when I would tour DJs, the first thing they would ask me is, when can we go to Revolver? Can we go check it out? Some of the guys there, like Spacey Space and Boogs and stuff, they've been playing there for like 30 years. And those guys, and Sunshine too, and those people basically are Melbourne veterans, and they're still popular and they still will demand massive fees, but not when they play at Revs, they get paid fuck all. But they still do every Sunday because it's a part of our culture and our history, and they're a massive part of it because they play there and they're involved with it from the get-go. But the people that own it make bulk cash because it's always busy and it's always open. Oh, they actually had a period of time where cops started to give them a bit of drama. There was a whole bunch of backlash about the cops taking the dogs in when the music was on, and obviously people were there and people were freaking out and taking more drugs than they should have and blah, blah, blah. And then I don't know what the outcome of that was, but other than that, it doesn't get a whole lot of pressure. It doesn't actually have a whole lot of dramas. I know a lot of people that have managed it and worked there, and they're like, yes, obviously people under the influence, but at the same time, it's a lot of an older crowd and they're pretty picky at the door, so they don't get a whole lot of dramas. You can get cooked there as long as you don't get too fucked up and you have to get kicked out. If you do, they ban you, and they're pretty strict with it. It's sort of like a weird, it's probably one of the only places in Melbourne, which is like the nanny state, where you are able to do what you want without a whole lot of persecution as long as you don't fuck up, and if you do, you lose that right. So there lay Somewhere Bar, and that place also pumps all the time, and why I've stopped to show that is that I used to own it. So the first bar I ever owned was not called Somewhere Bar, but it was the same location. It was called Rock, Paper, Scissors, and I was 22 years old. I turned 23 when I owned it. I owned it with the owners of TFU, and it was called Rock, Paper, Scissors, and we used to have like a steak night, and we could never get it to go properly, but the reason why was we had no money. We couldn't afford to renovate it properly, and we like ripped off the wall. We tried to make it grungy, we tried to do a whole bunch of stuff, and we just kept getting through week by week by week. I learned a lot of lessons. I did a lot of functions through there just to pay the bills, and I didn't lose money. I ended up getting exactly what I put in for about a year later, but I learned a fuckload. Afterwards, the guys who bought it, and they used to have a string of venues too. They used to own Esco Bar, one that I talk about pretty regularly, and a bunch of other ones in St Kilda. They bought it, and they basically did everything I would have done if I had the money. And it's been pumping for fucking 15 years since. So I wish Have you, bro? Yeah, what's going on?
I was reading about the wet pussy shit.
Oh, well.
That's funny, you fucking filming.
I'm filming now, yeah.
I didn't know it was you, but yelling some dumb shit out.
Yeah, that's all good. Sometimes you crow too early and you can't make it happen. So that's the thing that I think everyone should understand, is that sometimes if you don't have the resource to do something properly, maybe you shouldn't do it at all. So up here is High Street. We're in High Street, and there's 161. So 161 was the most exclusive club in Melbourne for a very, very long time. Back when I was younger, we used to finish up anywhere in the city and we would come here before we went to Revolver. And it was super hard to get into. You couldn't get into it unless you knew the owner or you knew somebody. You had to be a somebody in Melbourne to get in. They used to knock back footy players. They used to knock back celebrities. And basically what would happen if you went on a Friday was they literally had like a little peephole and they would just peep it and they wouldn't even come out to say no or yes. And they just close it. And if they closed it, you knew to fuck off. On a Saturday, there'd be swarms. So over here, there'd be people everywhere to get in. And the guy that used to run it was a guy called Zoc, and he would walk out and just literally finger people like Studio 54. He'd be like, you, and then he'd walk back inside and the guards would pull you in and you'd be able to go in there. What I found wild was that every time you go in there, it wasn't that busy. It was like sometimes there was more people outside than inside, but that was their business model. It was, everyone wanted to go there. I remember my mates' birthdays, they'd be like, man, can you please take me? Because it was so hard to get into and it was a bragging right. Like, if you could say you went to 161 on the weekend, it meant you were a fucking legend. I did one of my first events there. It was actually a schoolies party there. I never ran a night there or anything like that. I did one-offs, but I never ran like I never ran like a regular night there. I used to just go there to party afterwards. I used to drink vanilla vodka and apple juice. That was the drink that I used to drink when I was there. And the smoking area, you felt like you were gonna die when you were there. It was like it was like a little alleyway, and you were like crammed in with 700 other people. They ended up building that top area up the top there, and they now run a club called Breakfast Club. So Breakfast Club starts on Monday morning and runs till Tuesday morning. So if you want to party in Melbourne, and that's why I say it's the best place to party in Australia, you can literally start partying at midday or 10 o'clock on Saturday, and you don't have to go home till Tuesday if you want. You'd have to have a pocket full of Smarties, but if you did, you could continue to party. And there is people that I know who have done that run many, many times and still continue to do that. We'll walk past 161 now. I'm going to be a little bit sleuth because I don't want to get in trouble. And then I've got another fucking crazy story about it that I saw when I ran my event here. The old orange doors, man, they are very, very close to many people's heart. As I said, it was super hard to get into back in the day. I don't know if it still is now. Most of the people I know are like my age that go. So when people say, oh, where can I go when I'm older? I always say 161 because I feel like it just never ever stopped being the place to go for people who like dance and house music at my age and still like to party. So there's a lot of 30 plus people there. There's a lot of 40 plus people there that just enjoy a good time. A story I'm going to tell is I ran an event here and I saw a guy do something really, really fucked up. So basically, it was probably the most cooked thing I saw someone do, a security guard. It obviously wasn't the venue didn't know about it, and when we told them, they cracked the shits. But basically this dude, like a young guy, would have been probably 18 because it was a school's out event, so it was like a end of school event. He walked up and he was off his guts and he pissed on the wall. And they obviously cracked it, they grabbed him and they were upset about it. But basically what they did was, they made his mate, not him, made his mate take off his t-shirt and clean the piss up off the wall. And then they made them swap t-shirts. So the kid that pissed on the wall had to wear the pissy t-shirt and he was petrified. He was 18 years old. I'm sure he's scarred about it now. And it was fucking awkward and not funny. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? So when I told the venues, they weren't fucking happy about it. And I'm pretty sure that guy lost his job. But it was one of the most weirdest and kind of wrong power struggling fucking thing I ever saw. But in saying that, I can't understand how it happened because that joint there was so like synonymous with power. Like you had to be special person. You had to be, even to work there, it was like super exclusive. So I think the power just got to this guy's head and he just continued to do more and more fucked up shit and ended up being a complete fuckwit. But basically, that's what he did. That was the story and it was pretty wild to watch. So in my defense, when they were doing it, we were like, this is fucked up. But the guy didn't give a fuck. So we were saying it out loud, like, man, like, what are you doing? Look, why are you doing this? But it didn't stop the dude and he continued to do it and forced his kid to put on the pissy t-shirt that was his mate's. And as I said, it had nothing to do with the venue. It was a solo security guard that was working there and he was let go. So I don't want to conjoin the two, but it was a pretty fucked up thing. All right, so we are at the end of Chapel Street. We are on the corner of Dandenong Road and Chapel Street. There's a place behind me called Killing Time, which I'm going to tell a yarn about shortly. Other than that, there used to be a smoke joint here where you could buy all your paraphernalia for narcotics. You used to go there and they just pull out stuff fucking under the table and you could buy whatever you needed, including sometimes narcotics. But I don't think it's there anymore. Over here is Killing Time, and basically I'm surprised that it's still there. I didn't know that it still existed, to be honest. It shows how long it's been since I've been kicking on. But basically this joint was the last stop shop. So after everything closed, after Revolver, 161, Circus, you would head to Killing Time. It's very dark, very grungy. In my opinion, creepy. I found it very, very creepy when I used to come here. And it was kind of techno purist. And the yarn that I was going to tell, and I won't name the people, but it was a Revolver DJ, a very famous one, and also a Tramp DJ. And basically they were partying on, I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday. And they came here because normally it's always open, or the owner's here and he's serving beers. And it wasn't. They bought alcohol from the 24/7 bottle shop just down the road. And they jumped the fence and they started DJing in the back there and basically pissed on and basically did a BYO. And the guy found out that they did it and he wasn't very happy about it. But at the same time, they still went back to anything. They didn't get in trouble or anything like that. They basically threw their own party and killing time. And I would wish I was there because the two DJs that were playing were fucking big ones. And it would have been sick watching them just party in that back room playing tunes. So that's the end of Chapel Street. We went from Toorak down to Dandenong Road. If you're liking the channel, you're enjoying the content, please subscribe, comment, and like, and share it with a friend, please. And if I keep getting views and people keep enjoying it, I'll keep making these videos. I know that I missed some places. There's some places I already know on the top of my head as I'm driving away that I've missed. And also there's some stuff from before my time, like Dome and multiple other places. Silvers, I think, was there too, that I don't know about. So keep in mind when you're looking at my content, it was from 2003 to up until 2015 and onwards that I tell. I eventually want to go do a walkthrough with some older guys that can talk about the old days when shit was even crazier. So one of the stories from Doma, I know it was around here, and I'd love it to be told by an old timer, was there was a dude who pulled a gun out, and he was a famous gangster apparently, to shoot the guards at the door because he got knocked back or something had happened. And one of the guards, a famous security guard in Melbourne, basically ran at him and zigzagged, and then he popped off a shot, missed him, picked up the gun that he had and beat him to a pulp with the gun. So that's a crazy story that I've only been told through folklore. Like, I'm telling stories now to you guys. I've been told all these crazy wild stories before my time, and hopefully I get the opportunity to tell them through them, because no doubt they're going to be probably even more wild than the stuff that I talk about. So again, guys, thank you for your support and thanks for watching this. You're fucking all legends. Keep raving and I'll keep ranting.